So housing is the issue of our day, I suppose, Eamon. But at least Jim Mansfield has probably never had to share a three or four or a room with three or four other people in single beds. I would imagine. Like he's because, and the reason we're mentioning this is because his former home in Tasaggart House in County Dublin has been put up for rent, really, for student accommodation, and it's probably, if you look back in the history of time, it's the last place you would have expected to end up in this, being used in this place.
Yeah, I mean, but this is kind of the family home of what would have been one of Ireland's richest families, certainly in the Celtic Tiger times, the Mansfields. So Jim Mansfield Jr., has been using this as his address. One of the few companies that he's still registered as a director has it down as his address. We know, like, it's been in court, like the address was raided by the guards investigating money laundering and various criminality, and we know that he did time. He got 18 months for his part in trying to pervert the court of justice when he ordered CCTV from this area. That there's a house and there's also converted stables where Desi O'Hare and Declan Duffy would later be done for basically holding a man against his will. They were trying to evict the former head of security at City West, and took him and basically held him against his will and threatened his family and threatened him with torture. It's pretty nasty stuff. And Jim Mansfield Jr. then, of course, ordered the CCTV of anything to be erased. So he ended up in Portlaoise. So he might have got a bit of some ideas there about how you can pack people into a prison while he did his time there, although that's the high security. So in fairness, the chances are he had a cell most likely to himself. But now, so I mean, the cheapest price you can get a bed for $590 a month in Tasaggart House. I mean, it does look fabulous in the video that's up on social media. There's a couple of nice cars parked out the front. They couldn't resist in the old Celtic Tiger kind of whiff of too much money, let's say, and the very carefully manicured gardens. And so
it's effectively an old country house, is it? Like,
it's a period residence from. I think it's from the early 1800s. And it would have survived, I suppose, the War of Independence and everything else, and it was obviously over the years has been maintained in a top class state by the looks of it, because we were actually the promotional video actually takes you inside. There's a very enthusiastic presenter. She's seen, kicking a football on the lawns, telling people how wonderfully appointed it is and how close it is. It's only 40 minutes. Like on the dart into Dublin city centre. So it's perfect for students and it's very safe. They were obviously conscious of, I think, a lot of students coming to Ireland with the publicity of, I suppose, attacks on foreign individuals, that there is genuinely a little bit of worry about among foreign students who are coming new to Ireland. If they start looking up online, what's Ireland like, they're going to see some of this. So there was a lot about how safe it's going to be. There was video as well. Like, I mean, I think there was kind of 4 beds in a room, pretty close together. But and then there was a bank of numbered fridges, like in the kitchen area, and they had the old fashioned, from the upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey bells that were up on the wall. Presumably, they don't work anymore, not necessarily.
But that is a description, really, a good description of it. It is a kind of a
Downton Abbey type. Yes, the period residence, absolutely, yeah.
And as far as I know, Jim Mansfield Senior came into possession of the home. I think an elderly kind of woman from a very wealthy background had owned it before, and I think he bought it probably before he became a billionaire, or before he became super wealthy. He was on his way up. A complex character, Jim Mansfield Senior.
I mean, he was operating in that part of South County Dublin for years. I remember when I worked in the Tala Echo, like he was popping up on the radar, but just in terms of unauthorized developments and the difficulty in trying to get hold of any of the planning files, I do remember being an issue at the time. And, he kind of, the whole of City West, I think, when it was built, which the family no longer owns, there was a lot of a build now and ask for permission later kind of element going on. And I think, was it the Phoenix magazine used to always refer to him as the Squire of Saggart, that he quite enjoyed living the kind of the country, the lifestyle of the country elite, the country gent, yes, and all the rest of it. And this house really does, fit that
fit that.
it really does fit that picture, So
But of course, there was the other picture going on. The so while Jim Mansfield Senior started, certainly during the property boom, made an absolute fortune, and but he'd already been building houses before this, and always in the suspicion, or in the background, is the suspicion and the belief that at least part of his income was derived from criminals, really, and that he had been, along with other people such as Paddy Shanahan, a guy who was ultimately shot dead, that Mansfield had kind of specialised in helping launder, uh, you know, crime proceeds for well known criminals across the city, and that he'd had those two lives going simultaneously.
yeah, and he did come out, or he felt at one point he had to address that and say he was never involved in drugs. I mean, I suppose when his own private jet is caught in Belgium with 10 million euro worth of heroin, and sorry, I can't think of the gentleman's name who was
Got John
arrested.
Kinsella,
John Kinsella, a top class boxer, actually, I
yeah,
remember, and so I mean, Mansfield Senior then was came out and had to kind of deny anything involved in that. His story, I think, if I remember one late show, he talked about how he basically bought the rights to all the scrap on the Falkland Islands after the war between the UK and Argentina. And there was journalists at the time, I think, who eventually got around to trying to confirm this with the relevant British ministry, and there was nothing really to say whether it happened or not. So there
no.
was always a kind of a cloud over the story of how he originally made his money was never really tidied up. But by that stage, he'd moved on and had become this property magnate and was extremely wealthy.
But all of that wealth effectively disappeared during the collapse of the Celtic Tiger. Mansfield Senior, like many other developers in the country, was had developed huge debts speculating on property, and he'd also given a number of personal guarantees on his own properties that he'd owned. The crash happened. He was one of the guys who was really exposed by the crash, and at that point, the banks started to try and recover what money they could. Jim Mansfield Senior ultimately passed away as a result of a long term illness, and the I suppose the management of all of that complicated problems fell a lot of it fell to his son, Jim Mansfield Jr. Now we know obviously exactly what was going on in the background through a number of cases. The case you've referred to, where the security guard, Martin Byrne, ultimately became a state witness and spoke about what the attack on him and what was going on in the background. And then also we know what was going on in the background from a case brought by the Criminal Assets Bureau against Mansfield Jr. in relation to another house in this, not far away though from Saggart
Yeah,
House.
this is the house at Coldwater Lakes, and it was against Daniel Kinahan.
Yeah,
And basically it was 4.5 million euro in two suitcases was handed over to the Mansfields with the idea that this would be invested in property. And when the crash came, the money just disappeared into the whole sinkhole of debt that the Mansfields were in at that stage. And so this house then was handed over to the cartel for their use. And it was very much used by Daniel Kinahan and Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. They found personal effects belonging to Daniel Kinahan there, personal documents, I think flight details, things like that. And there was $5,000 in cash that had the words CAV, or the letters CAVS, KAVS. So presume that was Bomber's cash, for a little
yeah.
fund when he turns up to use the house. So and they kind of they successfully made the case anyway that it was basically in control of Daniel Kinahan and the cartel, and that it was all the proceeds of crime. And it was it last year, just the end of last year, it sold for 930,000, which was a good bit above the asking price. Like it was it was probably worth more than that at the height of the Celtic Tiger. It would have been closer to a 2 million
Yeah.
euro property at that stage. Like they were sought after, let's say. And it stands alone, obviously, in its own grounds. I think it's 5 bedrooms, and it looked quite nice on the pictures that we saw on the auction website as well. And it was around this time Nicola actually doorstepped him. If you remember, I think Mansfield Jr. was gone back to court looking to get his license restored. He'd lost his license, and so she had been trying to doorstep him, but he was avoiding her. And he basically, he was asked, like, were you ever involved in organized crime? And he says, no, I'll tell you what, I'll phone you later. Nothing to do with me. And he said, look, your father felt it necessary once to deny being involved. And he goes, is it time for you? And he says, it is time. We have nothing to do with drug dealing. I'll call you later. So needless to say, he didn't call later. And subsequently, we found out that he was taking like 4 million quid in 2 suitcases from Daniel Kinahan. So that's not involved in drug dealing. Just because you're not actually touching the drugs or carving up the stuff or, packaging it or sailing out to meet a yacht in the dark ocean, like, doesn't mean you're not involved. So if you're laundering money, if you're moving money around for a drug dealer like Daniel Kinahan, you're a drug dealer too.
Yeah, well, it's a key part of how that world has to operate, the cleansing of money. Now, Mansfield went away to Portlaoise for, I think it was an 18-month sentence, and since he's come out, we haven't heard much of him. He was obviously at one point a constant feature in the social pages of other newspapers like the Sunday Independent. Those days are certainly gone. Do we know what he's been up to since?
Not really. I mean, like, he registered a new firm just before he went in prison, Swiftbrook Services, and we had a look at it there this week. And there's been nothing in terms of returns made to the company records office. So, in terms of anything on official records, there's no great activity. So, to be honest, we don't know really what he's at these days. I presume he's involved in the accommodation services business by the looks of it. But apart from that, we can't really say. He's certainly not out and about, hanging out in all the glitzy nightclubs.
And in fairness, Sagard House, the accommodation does look nice. If you can see some of
they're great, isn't it? Yeah. You'd be tempted, all right.
If you see some of the hellhole places that go up on daft.ie for students, it certainly looks like one of the better end of these things.
No, it does. And I was looking at, like, one of the fridges there has number 23 in it. So I'm starting to wonder, like, if they're charging anywhere from $590 to just under $800 a month, like, how many people are in there and how much money is it worth? It could be quite lucrative.
Well, we're definitely in the wrong business, Eamon. There's no doubt about that.
I don't know about that.
Anyway, thanks, Eamon.
It was a pleasure, Niall.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.